Hey there, welcome to dotnetFlix. Today our guest is Jarne. And Jarne, you're going to talk about caching, right? Which is a hard problem to do, right? So I'm very curious what you have to say about caching.
Yeah, hello, Edwin and Sander. Glad to be back. And yeah, well, caching is not that hard if you do it correctly. But
Mhm.
indeed, today I'm going to give you guys an overview of all of the caching options that we currently have within .NET. And I'm
Mhm.
also going to be talking about a new one that has been introduced with .NET 9, the Hybrid Cache, and how
Cool.
that one comes into play. But
Nice.
without further ado, let's get stuck in.
Yeah, let's
So
dive in.
before I start talking about today's caching subject, I quickly want to show off the small demo application that I made to, well, show off the different caching options. So here we just have a very simple API that's going to guess your name based, or going to guess your age based on your name. So here I can, for example, enter my name, and it's going to say that I am, for example, 32 years old. Well, it's a little bit older, but it's still pretty close. But the nice thing here is that this is a deterministic API. So if I were to search this again, I'm always going to get the same result. So this is actually the perfect scenario to cache something, right? So let's actually quickly go to my IDE here. And I have a very simple .NET application here. So just the bare minimum. I'm setting up an API right here, the usual stuff. And here I have a guess age controller. So here I have a very simple controller method that's just going to accept a specific name. It's going to call that external API. And I currently don't have any caching just yet, but I quickly already want to show off the application. So it's already running. And here I'm going to call the API with your name, Sander, and with Edwin.
Oh boy.
Yeah, let's see. So hello, Sander, your age is guessed to be around 50. Well, I'm not sure that's entirely correct, Sander.
It's kind of depends what you mean with around, but okay, sure.
Well, I guess if you look at Edwin's result, you're going to be pretty happy because
Oh, that's much better. Yeah.
your age is guessed to be around 66. Well, in both cases, it cannot get any worse than this number, of course. But this is something we're going to cache. And quickly notice the response time. So at the moment when the API is warmed up, the average response time is around 125 milliseconds-ish. So this is what we're going to try and speed up with our caching today. So let's maybe start off with the most simple caching option that's out there. We already had it for quite some time, and it's the in-memory cache. So like the name implies, when your application instance is running, you can have a memory cache that runs alongside it. So to set it up, it's actually pretty easy, the basic stuff. So let me first of all stop the application right here. So if I want to introduce a memory cache, I can just say add memory cache to my dependency injection container right here. And then when I want to inject it, I can use the iMemory cache interface, memory cache. Also notice when I hover over here, so all of the caching abstractions we will be talking about, they all come from the Microsoft.extensions.caching.abstractions. And what I can do now is I can wrap this method that's going to the external API with my memory cache. So let's actually do that. So I'll quickly cut this, and then we have the memory cache. And the method we're going to use is get or create async. So this is basically a combined method that will, first of all, look if there is already a cache entry present for the thing that you're trying to get. And if that's the case, it's going to return that cache entry. And if not, then it's just going to call the external API in this case. So the first thing we need here is a cache key to have some kind of identifier. So let's quickly define that. So the thing we are going to create here is a guest age. And let's say that we're going to make it unique based on the name, like this. So now I can just pause along that cache key. And then the second parameter is just to call the underlying external API, in this case, if there is no cache entry that is present. So that's it. That's everything I need in order to have a working cache. So now if I were to start up the application again, you would see that the response time would drop dramatically. So let's give that a second to spin up. There we go. Now if I were to call your API again, Sander, okay, it's still warming up, so 681 milliseconds, but now if I call it again, 6 milliseconds. So that's already quite a lot faster. Same with yours, Edwin. So here, 122 milliseconds, and now 4 milliseconds. So that's very quickly an easy way on how you could set up an in-memory cache. Now, there are a few downsides when using the memory cache. First of all, this is not a distributed cache. So let's say that you are running in an environment with multiple instances of your application, maybe one in every region, of course, then it's going to become very difficult to, well, have your cache synchronized. So maybe you have some kind of load balancer, you're not necessarily calling the same application instance every time. That's a problem you have to take into account. Another problem is something we call stampede protection. So here in this case, let me just quickly stop the application again. I'm going to place a breakpoint right here. So this is going to call the external API. And let me just quickly debug the application here. So stampede protection, or the lack of stampede protection, basically means that when your cache gets invalidated and you have a high traffic application, then it could very well be that 100 requests are not reaching for your cache anymore, but are actually going to your external API. And in an ideal scenario, you would actually like to only of one of those requests to actually go to the external API, and maybe the other 99 to wait or just use that outdated cache for a little while longer. But here, if you're gonna see what's gonna happen, if I quickly also change this to Sander, let's call this once. So it's gonna hit this breakpoint, and let's also call the second one right here. So we are now in this breakpoint. If we resume this application, we're gonna hit the same breakpoint again. So it's not that the other one is gonna wait. In this case, we're both gonna reach for the external API because there was no cache. So we can conclude from this that the iMemory cache doesn't have any stampede protection. So that's also something we need to take into account when using this cache. Now, let's stop the application right here. And let's actually go back to the first issue, because the fact that this is not a distributed cache, that's actually something that we can solve. So in .NET, we also have the iDistributed cache. And one of the ways we could implement a iDistributed cache is with the Redis vendor. So this is the Redis vendor. I don't know, Edwin or Sander, if you guys have used Redis before?
Yeah, yep. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular caching solution.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, everything has to do something with AI nowadays, but as you can see, this has a lot to do with caching. And in .NET, we have the iDistributed cache interface, which means that we again have an abstraction, and we can use the Redis cache underneath as a implementation, but we could also use something else like Ncache, for example. But for this demo, I'm going to use Redis cache. And here I also have a project set up with that. So let's quickly go to the setup of this. And as you can see, it's actually pretty simple. Well, first of all, what I did is I have a Docker container locally that contains the distributed cache. So here, when I quickly enter Docker container ls, you can see I have an image, a Redis image here, which has been spinned up. And it's currently running on port 6379. And that's also the port I have configured right here. So this is the configuration that I need to set it up. And if we quickly also go and have a look at the package, in this case, I need to install Microsoft.extensions caching.stack exchange Redis. So that is what I need to set this up. And if we quickly go and have a look at the controller, we again have a interface, like I said before, and it's again coming from the abstractions namespace. And here the usage is a little bit different. So with the iMemory cache, we had that shared method, remember? But here we have it a little bit more split up. So here we both have a method for setting something in the cache and getting something from the cache. So again, we have a cache key. We get something from the cache. And here, if we detect that nothing is present, we are gonna get the real thing from the external API and then save it to the cache. If there was something present, we're just gonna deserialize it. So pretty straightforward stuff here. And let me quickly show this off to you. So let me first of all switch applications here and run this. And what I did here is I linked the Redis cache also here in my rider to the database tab. And as you can see, when I refresh this, currently it's empty. But as I now start to use this cache, right, we're getting back a response right here. So now the second one is saying 10 milliseconds. If I now refresh this, you can see I have a cache entry right here. So it's using the distributed cache. And when I click on this, you can also see that the value is correctly stored in the distributed cache. So that's also pretty nice. Now, again, with this one, we have a few downsides. So here, again, we don't have any stampede protection. So the thing I showed off with the iMemory cache, we also don't have that here with the distributed cache. So that's also something to take into account. And also another thing is we quite have the opposite problem here that we didn't have with the memory cache. So here we don't have a local cache. And currently I'm still running my application or the distributed cache locally rather. So the latency is still quite slow. But if I were to run this maybe in a distributed environment in the cloud, then you could maybe expect higher latencies. And people have tried to solve this in the past by maybe combining the iDistributed cache with the iMemory cache and writing their own solutions. Well, luckily for us, this is not something that we actually need to do. So there are actually packages out there that have their own caching mechanism that underneath both combine the iDistributed cache and iMemory cache. And that are the two caches we are going to talk about next. So we're going to talk about the newly introduced HybridCache that came with .NET 9. And we're also going to talk about one that has been out for a little while longer, a third-party variant called FusionCache. But let's maybe first focus on the HybridCache. So let's shut this all down for a moment. And let's go to the HybridCache project right here. So like the name implies, HybridCache, it's a hybrid form. So now here we have both the memory cache and iDistributed cache at our disposal. And the way we set this up, first of all, we need to download the HybridCache package. So here we have Microsoft.extensions.cache.hybrid. And this is actually the default implementation of the HybridCache from Microsoft. Because yes, that's small spoiler, but others have made their own implementation of the HybridCache already as well. But this is the one from Microsoft that we need to download. And here you can kind of like see the setup. So very simple, we just introduce a HybridCache. And let me just quickly comment this out because as far as the setup of HybridCache goes, this is actually everything I need. So if I only want a local cache, hence a memory cache, then I only need this as my setup. But if I also want a distributed cache alongside that memory cache, then I can also place this right here, which is actually the same setup as with the distributed cache, but this will automatically hook into the HybridCache. Now, I'm actually a bit curious here because about your opinion as well, Edwin and Sander. The fact that this is automatically working if you just place this right next to the HybridCache and it links up automatically. What do you think of this? Is this clear?
Well, it's a little bit of magic. The scenario I'm thinking about is what if I've got two different caches? Mm-hmm. So I want Redis to cache some stuff and I've got another product that I want to cache some other stuff. Is that possible? Can I give names or identifiers to these things?
Yeah, definitely. You can do that. Yeah, certainly. So in more advanced scenarios, you can, I've never tried it myself, but it's definitely possible to give names to your caches. And what's also possible is that you can give tags to your caches. So you could, for example, have certain things from a certain category that are specific to one setup of a cache, and then things that are very specific to another type of cache. And that way you can configure them separately. And if later on you want to invalidate the cache, then you can just use that specific tag to say, I just want to invalidate that part of my cache. So that's definitely possible. But here in this case, yeah, I have to agree with you. So there is definitely some magic going on right here. I'm just going to quickly write some pseudocode. So it would have been more clear.
Maybe to add to that, because also the scenario I'm thinking about is that I would like to use Redis just as you're doing right now, right, on your dev machine, just in a container, but maybe in production I need to use a different cache or something like that. That's also a scenario that you will really like to support in here. And maybe I think maybe .NET Aspire can help you with that, or some other abstraction layer, but that's something that I would need for my applications.
Yeah. And that's definitely something like, indeed, Edwin, like you're mentioning, .NET Aspire is definitely something that you can that can help you with that. Yeah, indeed. But to make this more clear, it would be nice if we had something like this, right? So with distributed cache, and then you could just come like new Redis cache, that you can clearly see that these things belong together. But now, I guess when you have never heard of HybridCache before, this can be a little bit confusing, right? The fact that these things are separate.
Yeah.
But anyhow, let's maybe have a look at the implementation for now. So this is the guess-h controller again, and here we have the HybridCache being injected. Now, this is not the implementation because, well, this is not an interface, it's actually an abstract class. Another weird choice from Microsoft, in my opinion. So why not keep things consistent, but how well. So this is an abstract class in this case, still coming outside of the Microsoft extensions caching.abstractions. And well, yeah, the fact that it's an abstract class still means that you can mock it out when testing stuff, I guess. But it's just an interesting choice. What is pretty nice is that they kept the same API as with the iMemory cache. So in this case, they also have that combined method get or create async, which makes writing this really neat. And this is your HybridCache working. And here I can maybe also show off one of the other features, because you can also configure your caches separately, because now I have a global configuration that both uses the memory cache and distributed cache, but maybe in this instance, I don't want that. I can change specific implementations by passing flags. So here in this case, I can, for example, pass a flag that I only want to use a local cache. So no distributed cache in this case. And that will also take that into account. Well, I can run this, of course, but it's going to produce the same outcome. So in that sense, it's just going to use a combined hybrid cache and memory cache, distributed cache and memory cache, sorry. But it's going to use that. But I'm actually still going to run it, because there is one other thing that's pretty nice about the hybrid cache. It's actually that this cache got stampede protection. All right, let me just quickly switch projects here, because I indeed wanted to show off something else. And that's the fact that the hybrid cache also has stampede protection built in. So that's pretty great. So let me just quickly debug the application right here, and then I can show you guys it. And let me also just place a breakpoint right here on the getting the real external API again. So now when I run this, you can see it hits the real breakpoint again. And when I run the second one also, when I now resume the application, it's not going to trigger the second time. So it's actually already going to use that cached response, which is pretty great. So in this case, it has that stampede protection built in. So this is quickly in a nutshell the hybrid cache. I would say it's still a pretty basic but solid caching solution from Microsoft. And currently, how I see it, because it's still released in .NET 9, and there are also still some small issues with the hybrid cache, and I'll be sure that we will link them down below in the video description as well. But there are still some small issues as well with the hybrid cache. So my advice would be to experiment with it already, but don't really start in using it in production already. For that, we already have a few more caching solutions that are actually more mature. And one of them is FusionCache. I don't know if you guys have heard of FusionCache before, Edwin and Sander.
I haven't.
No, I haven't. No, it's new for me.
FusionCache is actually, in a nutshell, at the basis, the same as HybridCache. So it also combines the iMemory cache and the iDistributed cache underneath. And it also has things like stampede protection, so the same as with HybridCache, but it's a more mature and more feature-rich caching solution. And what's actually pretty funny is when they were making the HybridCache solution, is that they used a lot of inspiration for making that cache from this library, from FusionCache. And even the name HybridCache, funnily enough, was suggested by the author himself. So by the person who created FusionCache. So in that sense, what I think Microsoft now did is they made their own basic solid version of a caching solution. But my prediction here is that they will not try and outmatch FusionCache in number of features. They will just keep it as a good basic option. And then this is going to be your more feature-rich caching solution if you want some more advanced caching. But I'm not here in this video going to talk about all of the features of FusionCache, but I do quickly wanted to show you on how to set it up in your application. So let's quickly stop this and go to the FusionCache project right here. So setting up FusionCache is actually pretty straightforward. So here again, if you're just doing the basics, we really only need one package. So the FusionCache NuGet package. But in this case, I also opted for a different serialization, system text JSON in this case. So I also downloaded that package as well. And here we can see the setup of FusionCache at work. So notice how this is already a lot more clear, guys. So here we have that method chaining going on. We clearly see this is all working together. Here we have some default entry options. The lifetime of our cache is now currently configured to be 10 minutes. We have that serializer that is configured, and we also have that distributed cache set up as well. Now, before I show you guys the implementation of the FusionCache, I actually quickly want to show you guys something really, really cool. Because let's say in the future that a HybridCache, it's shipping with .NET 10, it's stable enough that we can start using it. It's still pretty basic, but you are starting off with a basic application, so you decide, okay, let's use HybridCache for now. But then later on, your application becomes more mature, more complex, so you are in need of some more advanced features that only FusionCache can provide. So you're going to make the decision to switch from HybridCache to FusionCache. Now, if you're using FusionCache, then normally you need to inject the iFusionCache dependency everywhere. So imagine you need to change that everywhere. So everywhere now not HybridCache anymore, but the iFusionCache. But what I said before is the HybridCache is an abstract class. And what FusionCache actually did is they made their own implementation of HybridCache. And I quickly want to show how that works. So what I can do right now is I can take the dependencies of the FusionCache library. And let's say I use this as an example right here, the hybrid project. I place my dependencies right here. And I also copy over the implementation, or the configuration rather, to here. Then I can just replace that. And let me just also import everything. All right. And then the only thing I need to do is say as HybridCache. And what it's now going to do is it's going to use that same abstraction. And underneath, it's going to use iFusionCache. So this makes it really easy to switch. Of course, it comes with the small note that if you do want to use those more advanced features, and I'll show you one in just a moment, then we do need to switch to the iFusionCache interface, of course. But in hindsight, this makes it very easy to start off with a very simple and basic caching solution like HybridCache in the future, and at some point maybe switch to FusionCache as well. And what's actually pretty funny, the abstraction HybridCache was out before Microsoft released their default implementation. And FusionCache made use of that. And they were actually the first to make a production-ready HybridCache API, even before Microsoft. So that's actually pretty funny. But now Microsoft also has their default implementation ready to go. But let's actually maybe to just wrap things up, show you one of the advanced features you have with the iFusionCache library. So here what I can, for example, do is when I use the iFusionCache, I can, for example, set things up like a failsafe. So let's say that my cache gets invalidated after those 10 minutes, but for some reason I can't reach the external API anymore. Then it would be nice if I can just give back that cache for a little while longer to keep my application up and running. So in this case, I can, for example, use options and pause them along like this. All right, there we go. And here I can configure many things. And one of the things I'm going to configure is set failsafe. I'm going to set that to true. And here I can, for example, give it a time span of 2 hours. So I can, for example, keep my cache alive for 2 hours longer in case of failures. And I can also configure when it's going to recheck every time. So here I can say, okay, I'm going to recheck every minute to see if my external API is working again so that I can update my cache. So, and this is just one example, but all of the features are very easy to use from FusionCache. And I think as far as advice goes, if you are already thinking that you're going to need to have an advanced option for your caching, then definitely have a look at FusionCache. And if in the future with .NET 10, there is a stable version with HybridCache already, then it might be good to already also have a look at that basic option as well, because then you don't need to pull in third-party dependencies from the get-go. But as far as caching solutions go, this one is pretty solid. But yeah, that's about it. So cool. Just a quick overview of all the caching options that are out there, and also some pointers to what you might want to use.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like when Microsoft provides these abstractions. You know, it reminds me of the iLogger interface where you can use their implementation. And if you want some advanced stuff, you can look at a Siri log, for example.
Yeah, indeed.
This is, of course, very similar to that. It's a nice model.
It's straight from the framework and library developer handbook. This is how you should do that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's good. By the way, that website API you use, HFI, you can also, by default, it uses some global logic, but you can also pass in the country where you live in. So if I pass in the Netherlands, the result is now 45 years old, which is much closer,
which is
much
a
better.
little bit better, yeah. So, yeah.
I will probably be 75 then, but
you were 54, which is also much closer.
Much closer.
It's still not good enough.
About 4 years closer then.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool.
So,
all
but
right.
cool stuff, Jarne. I mean, caching is really important for application performance. So it's really nice to see Microsoft working on that HybridCache and see what you can do with FusionCache. So I'm looking forward to .NET 10 in the fall to see what else they did and if it becomes stable enough to really use in our product.
I hope so as well.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks again for giving your talk here. For those watching at home, if you like this, please subscribe and like, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.